The low drone of the engines filled the cabin of Flight 729 as it leveled off above the clouds. Soft morning light streamed through the windows, casting golden streaks across the interior. 12-year-old Jordan Ellis sat in seat 18F, face turned toward the sky outside, his small frame tucked neatly into his seat. His backpack was stowed, his seatbelt buckled. He sat still, just like his father had told him. Jordan had never flown alone before. Normally, his dad sat right beside him, cracking jokes or pointing out cloud formations that looked like dragons or trucks. But this flight was different. A last-minute reshuffle had bumped Jordan's father, Xavier Ellis, former middleweight champion, and now a respected motivational speaker, into first class, while Jordan remained in coach. At the gate, Xavier had crouched in front of him, strong hands on Jordan's shoulders, and said, "You're ready for this. Keep calm, keep your chin up, and don't let anybody shake you. I'm just a few rows away." Jordan had nodded, trying to look braver than he felt. Now, alone at 30,000 feet, Jordan stole a glance at the man seated beside him in 18D. The man hadn't said a word since boarding. Not a hello, not even a glance. He just dropped into the seat with a grunt, adjusted his belt with a kind of dismissive grunt, and muttered something under his breath. His name, according to the boarding pass he hadn't quite hidden well enough, was Leonard Fisk. He wore a beige windbreaker zipped halfway up despite the warm cabin, and his face was as tight as his posture. His thinning hair clung to the sides of his scalp, and his small eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses flicked around with the kind of irritation that never needed a reason. From a moment Jordan had sat down, Leonard had sighed, tapped, shifted, and made it painfully clear that a kid in the next seat was the worst thing that could have happened to his morning. Jordan tried to ignore him. He focused on the sky outside, on the clouds shaped like waves and sleeping bears, on the song his dad always played in the car before a big moment. But then Leonard's voice cut through the calm. "Figures," the man muttered, not quite under his breath. Jordan flinched but said nothing. He hoped maybe Leonard was just talking to himself. But then came a second jab. "Disruptive little thing," Leonard said louder. "You kids can't sit still 2 damn minutes, can you?" Jordan turned toward him, startled. "I didn't do anything," he said softly. "You're breathing too loud." The words didn't make sense, but they felt like a slap. Jordan clenched his fists in his lap and turned back toward the window. He wanted to press the call button, ask for a different seat, but he could hear his father's voice in his head. "Stay steady. Don't let them see you scared." So he stayed. A few minutes later, "You kicked the seat in front of you." "I didn't," Jordan replied, more confused and afraid now. "No respect," Leonard muttered. "That's the problem." A woman across the aisle in a gray blazer glanced over. She looked at Jordan, then Leonard, then back to her book. The silence in Jordan's chest grew louder than the engines outside. Then came the punch. No warning. "No preamble." Leonard snapped, "Stop moving," and before Jordan could reply, a fist came down on his shoulder hard and sudden. Jordan gasped. The sound wasn't loud, but the silence it shattered was deafening. The cry that came from the boy echoed through the cabin. The man in the aisle across spilled his coffee. A woman gasped. Another stood. "Did he just hit that kid?" someone said aloud. Leonard stood, chest puffed, hands still half raised like he thought he had the right. "He wouldn't stop fidgeting," Leonard barked. "I warned him." Jordan sat stiffly, shoulders squared, trying not to cry. Not because he didn't want to, but because crying felt like surrender. A male flight attendant rushed down the aisle. "Sir, step away from the child," he said, sharp and clear. Leonard turned toward him, fists clenched. "You don't tell me how to discipline a child. He's been bouncing around like a damn pinball." "He hasn't moved," a voice said from the back. "He was sitting still the whole time," another added. "I've got it on video," a young man in row 20 said, holding up his phone. Leonard's face flushed. His authority crumbled. He looked around, realizing the cabin had turned against him. In first class, Xavier Ellis had been flipping through a magazine when the sound reached him sharp, panicked, unmistakable. It was his son's voice. He stood without thinking. A young flight attendant tried to stop him. "Sir, please remain seated." "That's my son," Xavier said, his voice ironclad. He brushed past her, reached the curtain between cabins, and pushed through. Jordan was curled up in a seat, one hand pressed to his shoulder, small face twisted with shock. Leonard was still talking, trying to explain himself to a flight attendant. I didn't hit him. The kid was loud, moving around. Xavier stopped walking. His body was still, but every inch of him was coiled. You the boy's father? Leonard scoffed. Maybe teach him some manners next time. Xavier said nothing. The silence in the cabin thickened. Then, he stepped forward. Not fast, not loud, just with purpose. He knelt beside his son and gently touched Jordan's shoulder. You okay? He asked. Jordan nodded, tears in his eyes. I didn't do anything. I know, Xavier said. Then he stood. Captain, he called to the front. This man assaulted a minor. A second flight attendant picked up the phone. Yes, Captain. We have a situation. Requesting ground security upon landing. The curtain behind them parted again as word traveled fast. That's Xavier Ellis, someone whispered. The champ. Recognition spread like a spark to dry kindling. Leonard blinked, his bravado faltering. You hit my son, Xavier said, voice low, and I could end you for that. But I won't. He leaned closer. I'll let the law do it. The captain diverted the flight. Emergency landing. By the time they reached the ground, uniformed officers stood at the jet bridge. Leonard was escorted off the plane, red-faced and muttering. You people are making a mistake, he barked. Outside the terminal, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread. Breaking, child assaulted mid-flight. Son of former champion Xavier Ellis involved. Inside the private terminal room, Jordan sat beside his father as they gave statements. Officer Darrell Hoyt reviewed footage and files. This isn't just a random incident, he later told Xavier. We dug into Leonard Fisk's past. He worked at a youth facility that shut down after multiple abuse allegations. All boys, mostly black. They were looking at more than an isolated assault. They were staring down a pattern, a system, one that had failed before. Back at their hotel that night, Xavier stood at the desk, reading an email. It came from someone anonymous. He was on a list, the message read. Internal watch list. Flagged for aggression. Airline ignored the warnings. Protected, but not for long. Attached was a file of sealed complaints, witness names, corporate ties to the leasing company Leonard had stakes in. Xavier stared at it. This wasn't just about his son anymore. It was about every child who'd ever been overlooked. He met with airline executives days later. They tried to smooth it over. He wasn't having it. I'm not here to settle, Xavier said. I'm here to fix what you buried. He demanded 3 things. A permanent ban of Leonard Fisk from all airline operations. A program to train staff in anti-bias protections and support young solo travelers. Public accountability. When they hesitated, he laid the evidence on the table. Photos, videos, legal files, and a press release ready to go. They folded. The airline issued an apology. They launched Jordan's Shield, a youth traveler protection initiative. They cut ties with Fisk's company. And Xavier Ellis walked out not as a fighter but as a father who had fought without raising his fists. At the Youth Advocacy Summit months later, Xavier and Jordan stood side by side. I'm not here as a boxer, Xavier said at the podium. I'm just a dad. My son was hurt, and I stood up, because silence is a choice. And I chose to speak. The crowd rose, and a movement began. Protect Jordan trended globally. And in homes across the country, children watched and knew they mattered. Because someone had stood up and made the world listen.